The skeleton soldier lies flat on the ground, his entire body trembling violently as if enduring bone-chilling agony. In his final moments, the skeleton soldier can only whisper in despair that he is slowly fading away. His last memories drift toward the succubus queen, the master to whom he had pledged his unwavering loyalty. But instead of protection, the succubus queen coldly swings her blade, piercing through the skeleton soldier without a moment's hesitation. Though run through, the skeleton soldier desperately reaches out, begging for the torment to stop. His plea goes unanswered. Instead, a heavy shield crashes down upon the skeleton soldier's head. The massive impact sends the skeleton soldier's skull flying from his body, shattering it into pieces under the brutal assault. The succubus queen stands there, watching the fragments of her subordinate scatter, blood still staining her hands. Her breathing is ragged, and cruelty is etched across her face as she gazes down at the wreckage beneath her feet. With only his rolling skull left, the skeleton soldier silently calls out his master's name one last time in utter shock. The succubus queen places a hand on the skeleton soldier's skull, whispering a belated apology for failing to protect him. Bitter betrayal looms heavily as the succubus queen stares at the remains of the one who had been so loyal to her. Another figure appears, sword in hand, looking down at the skull with absolute contempt. Skeleton soldier's skull rolls away, carrying the lingering regret of a lost opportunity. The enemy laughs triumphantly, gloating over the skeleton soldier's weakness. Rolling across the ground, the skeleton soldier still yearns for the power to change his fate. The enemy shows no mercy, crushing the skull under his boot, extinguishing all hope. A scream of agony rings out. The enemy howls in pain as his own foot suffers a deep wound. The skeleton soldier's blood-stained teeth sink deep into the one who tormented him. In his final moments, the skeleton soldier desperately craves a second chance to redo everything. The enemy, furious, stomps on the skull with his heel, mocking that the skeleton soldier is nothing more than mere bones. Gloomy clouds gather, signaling the start of a mysterious new beginning. The skeleton soldier wakes up, looking around in complete bewilderment. This is no dream. Could this be the afterlife he has finally stepped into? Surroundings feel strangely familiar, leaving the skeleton soldier utterly confused. A status window appears, confirming that the skeleton soldier has leveled up with stats far exceeding normal limits. A voice rings out, addressing the skeleton soldier as an immortal being. Lily appears, declaring that she is the one who awakened him from his eternal slumber. The skeleton soldier is stunned, struggling to remember who Lily is. If that person is truly Lily, then everything has spiraled far beyond his control. Skeleton Knight wonders if Lily is the summoner who created him 20 years ago. Amidst the torrential rain, the Skeleton Knight is shocked to realize the setting is exactly when he was first summoned. The Skeleton Knight ponders what would happen if it wasn't Lily. Lily scratches her head in confusion, muttering to herself that a skeleton shouldn't be able to speak. Suddenly, the succubus queen appears, her body covered in wounds, blood flowing onto the ground. The Skeleton Knight stares at the scene before him in shock. Lily still stands there, completely unaware of the succubus queen's presence. The Skeleton Knight decides to change his plans immediately. Skeleton Knight lunges forward and scoops Lily up onto his shoulder, much to her surprise. Lily panics, demanding that the Skeleton Knight put her down while reminding him of his duty to protect her. The Skeleton Knight remains silent, focusing entirely on moving forward. The Skeleton Knight firmly asserts to Lily that he will protect her at all costs. Lily stands frozen, her eyes wide with shock at the Skeleton Knight's unexpected behavior. Lily stammers, demanding that the Skeleton Knight put her down. The Skeleton Knight whispers to himself that if he cannot protect Lily, his existence would be meaningless. System notification chimes, startling the Skeleton Knight. The S-rank scenario titled Lily officially begins, leaving the Skeleton Knight filled with confusion. As he continues moving, the Skeleton Knight struggles to recall details about Lily. An information board appears, confirming that Lily is a summoner and that she is slowly developing feelings for the Skeleton Knight. Lily attempts to call out to the Skeleton Knight to talk. Lily asks if it is time for the Skeleton Knight to set her down yet. The Skeleton Knight signals for Lily to stay quiet so they can hide. The sound of galloping hooves thunders along the path. A group of men is approaching their location. The Skeleton Knight observes the situation with intense tension. Hogel realizes he had misjudged the true motives of these men. Hogel confirms with certainty that they are hunting Lily. A mercenary holding a crossbow reports that he sees no one. A group of mercenaries decides to retreat after failing to find their target. Lily breathes a sigh of relief, having narrowly escaped danger. Amidst the cold rain, Lily trembles as she voices her suspicions about the stranger's identity. Unwavering, Lily declares that she is the rightful heir of a lord. Suddenly, an arrow pierces Lily's shoulder, blood splatters in a moment of pure shock. Skeleton Knight turns his head in a start, his empty eye sockets tracking the trajectory of the flying arrow. From the shadows of the forest, a stranger lurks with a crossbow in hand. Hogel emerges with a sinister, mocking smirk. He has been tracking them for a long time. Lily clutches her shoulder wound, writhing in pain as the arrow remains deeply embedded in her flesh. Hogel steps forward, sneering at Lily's title as an heir with a tone of utter contempt. Hogel declares that he is under orders to carry out his mission. Hogel's gaze is filled with bloodlust as he threatens to take Lily's head before leaving. In the face of impending death, Lily struggles to hold on to her last ounce of strength. The skeleton knight lunges forward, lifting a massive boulder above Hogel, ready to strike a lethal blow. Lily whispers a reassurance, telling Hogel not to worry so much about her dying. The bony hand of the skeleton knight reaches out, a strange gesture amidst the blood-soaked battlefield. The skeleton knight kneels before Lily, swearing to protect her at all costs. Lily is stunned, her golden eyes widening as she looks at the skeleton kneeling at her feet. The skeleton knight urgently urges Lily to flee immediately. A powerful strike from Hogel's weapon slams into the skeleton knight's head, causing him to stagger. Gloomy sky roars, signaling a disaster about to befall the two as they run. The skeleton knight looks back, bewildered, as if he has just experienced something incomprehensible. The skeleton knight looks down into the abyss that has just appeared, exclaiming in shock at how utterly absurd the situation is. The skeleton knight still cannot believe his eyes, confusedly wondering what just happened. Lily screams in panic as she realizes the presence of an undead creature right beside her. Lily raises her hands high, boldly declares her name, and asserts that she is the one who awakened the skeleton knight from his eternal slumber. Amidst the torrential forest rain, Lily declares that she is the one who awakened the skeleton knight from his eternal slumber. The skeleton knight struggles to his feet, telling himself he's doing fine and has been resurrected once again, yet he can't help but be astonished by his own newfound strength. Still in the same spot, the skeleton knight senses a bizarre change within his skeletal frame. The skeleton knight realizes everything remains exactly the same, except for one unique difference awaiting him. Memorial notification window pops up, prompting the skeleton knight to choose one of two rewards: increased affinity with the summoner or increased physical damage resistance. The skeleton knight ponders the benefits of these rewards. A surprise attack strikes, forcing the skeleton knight to react instantly. The skeleton knight questions whether his choice was sufficient to prepare for the impending danger. Unable to hesitate, the skeleton knight decides he must move immediately. The skeleton knight turns to observe his surroundings, feeling a shift in the atmosphere. Lily also realizes the urgency of the situation. She doesn't want to stand still and take the hit any longer. The skeleton knight orders Lily to quickly find cover behind a rock. Lily looks on, bewildered, unable to understand why the skeleton knight is acting so suddenly. The skeleton knight warns Lily that mercenaries are closing in, sending her into a panic. Lily falls silent, trying to steady herself after hearing the news. Lily wonders how the skeleton knight could have known about the enemy's arrival in advance. The skeleton knight replies briefly, asserting his instinct. Lily remains shaken by that vague answer. The sound of horse hooves echoes from afar. Both Lily and the skeleton knight realize the danger is truly imminent. Lily panics, realizing that time is running out. The skeleton knight asks Lily to hand him the dagger at her waist. With ironclad determination, the skeleton knight promises to protect Lily. Lily hesitates for a moment before deciding to trust him and hand over the weapon. Lily gives the dagger to the skeleton knight and offers him her sincere thanks. The skeleton knight focuses intensely, preparing for the battle ahead. The mercenaries appear on the path, closing in on Lily and the skeleton knight's position. One mercenary orders his comrades to wait while he goes to scout the area himself. Mercenary draws his weapon, his gaze filled with killing intent as he scans the perimeter. The mercenary curses in anger upon seeing that the prey has vanished. In the pouring rain, the skeleton knight lies slumped on the ground, his hand still gripping his sword as if clinging to his final shred of life. Kunin stands towering behind him, gruffly demanding the whereabouts of the target, his patience having reached its limit. Without a moment's hesitation, Kunin's sharp blade slashes through the air, sending blood splattering in all directions. The victim's blood-soaked hand drops to the cold ground as the echoes of a shrill scream linger. At the same moment, the skeleton knight rises, with level-up notifications appearing in rapid succession, marking a powerful resurrection. The empty gaze of the skeleton knight locks onto the bald warrior wielding a warhammer before him. The bald warrior's warhammer crashes down, the terrifying impact tearing through the atmosphere. Bald warrior roars in rage as his attack fails to yield the desired result. The system suddenly announces a special bonus triggered by the skeleton knight's ability to withstand blows from blunt weapons. The bald warrior is stunned, casting his eyes around and wondering if there is a hidden dungeon nearby. Despite minimizing the damage, the skeleton knight's bones still sustain severe fractures. Not giving the skeleton knight a chance to breathe, the bald warrior swings his hammer, determined to crush his opponent into dust. Skeleton Knight calmly allocates his stat points into agility, focusing all his concentration on annihilating the bald warrior. An arrow tears through the wind, leaving a pitch-black streak across the night sky. The crisp sound of shattering bones echoes, signaling that a critical blow has just landed on the Skeleton Knight. Once again, the Skeleton Knight falls under the brutal attack of the bald warrior. But with his agility significantly increased, the Skeleton Knight is no longer the same as before, ready for a counterattack. The bald warrior trembles, fear begins to consume his mind as he realizes something is wrong. The bald warrior is astonished, he cannot comprehend how the Skeleton Knight is still standing firm. Doubt is written all over the bald warrior's face, he cannot believe his own eyes. Seizing the moment, the Skeleton Knight launches a lightning-fast counterattack, leaving the bald warrior no time to react. The Skeleton Knight's sharp blade tears through the air, forcing the bald warrior to retreat to dodge. The Skeleton Knight continuously applies pressure, his lethal sword strikes forcing the bald warrior onto the defensive. With terrifying speed, the Skeleton Knight lunges forward as blood spurts from the bald warrior's wounds. The bald warrior's eyes roll back, life is slowly slipping away from his body. The battle finally comes to an end with the death of the bald warrior. The bald warrior collapses, his lifeless eyes staring up at the stormy sky. Under the lightning streaking across the sky, the Skeleton Knight stands silently watching the fallen bald warrior. The Skeleton Knight stands amidst the blood-soaked battlefield, declaring his victory. Lily hides behind the wall, her eyes wide with terror, wondering if this nightmare has truly ended. Lily breathes a sigh of relief, her trembling hand wiping sweat from her forehead. The horrifying nightmare seems to have receded, leaving Lily in a suffocating silence. But just then, the Skeleton Knight looks up at the sky, where painful memories come flooding back. After tasting death 3 times, the Skeleton Knight has finally found a reason to stand tall and protect the one he cherishes. The blade is stained with fresh blood, marking the aftermath of a brutal battle. Amidst a battlefield littered with corpses, the Skeleton Knight stands motionless, his hand still gripping his crimson sword tightly. Lily stares at the Skeleton Knight in shock, her eyes filled with sheer terror. The Skeleton Knight falls into deep thought, realizing the cruel reality that every time he dies in battle, he is dragged back to the moment he was summoned. Even though he returns to level 1, the Skeleton Knight retains all the skills and stats he has accumulated. Each resurrection grants the Skeleton Knight new abilities, yet he cannot help but worry about the limits of this immortality. The Skeleton Knight speaks up, breaking the heavy silence. Lily looks straight at the Skeleton Knight, questioning if he is truly listening to her. Walking ahead, the Skeleton Knight admits he was distracted and asks Lily to repeat what she just said. Lily sighs in frustration at the Skeleton Knight's attitude. Lily begins to talk about her late father, a kind-hearted lord, while the Skeleton Knight quietly lights the way for her through the dark cave. Lily continues, recounting how the new king ascended the throne and incited war, making peaceful lords like her father targets for purges. A cruel fate struck, her father fell, forever lying in a pool of bright red blood. Lily stands frozen in place, her pupils dilated as her entire world seems to collapse before her eyes. Lily clutches her head, screaming in despair as fragments of horrific memories tear through her mind. The sound of Lily's sobbing echoes through the cold stone cavern. Skeleton Knight sits down to listen, pondering the impending war. The Skeleton Knight tells himself that Lily is merely a poor victim caught in the swirl of these power struggles. The Skeleton Knight resolutely vows to protect Lily, even if he cannot prevent the war itself. Lily wipes away her tears, gives a bitter smile, and tells herself she must become stronger. Lily yearns for the day she can reunite with her master. The Skeleton Knight and Lily agree to head toward the nearest village. To continue their journey through the gloomy cave. Lily smiles softly, breaking the tense atmosphere between her and the Skeleton Knight. Lily's agile footsteps hurry toward the light. A brilliant light appears before them as they step out of the cave. Lily cries out with excitement as she sees the snow-covered mountain ranges. The Skeleton Knight has barely finished commenting on the snow when a snowball is suddenly thrown straight into his face. Lily giggles, teasing the Skeleton Knight not to be so emotionless. In reality, the Skeleton Knight possesses no emotions at all. Lily teases him about it, but the Skeleton Knight just quietly urges her to hurry up. The two continue their journey, crossing treacherous, windswept mountains. Lily pants, complaining about the steepness of the path while confirming their destination is the city of Yahello. The Skeleton Knight nods in confirmation, and Lily suggests buying him a set of armor upon arrival to avoid drawing attention. Skeleton Knight is surprised, realizing that walking around in his skeletal form would indeed cause big trouble. Just then, Lily suddenly slips on the snowy cliffside. Panic flashes in Lily's eyes as she loses her balance. Skeleton Knight lunges forward without a moment's hesitation. In the nick of time, the Skeleton Knight reaches out and grabs hold of Lily. The heavy impact makes them both wobble, but the Skeleton Knight manages to hold on to her tightly. Lily is stunned, still reeling from the fall that nearly cost her her life. Both of them are exhausted, collapsing into the snow after narrowly escaping the danger. Lily smiles with deep gratitude, silently thanking the skeleton knight for always protecting her. The skeleton knight says nothing, simply gathering his belongings in silence. The skeleton knight reminds Lily that their destination is close, urging her to push on just a little further. The skeleton knight helps Lily up as they continue their journey along the rugged, rocky path. Fatigue is clearly etched on their faces, yet they refuse to stop. Under the shadow of the mountains, the skeleton knight and Lily trudge onward, leaving tracks behind in the cold snow. Suddenly, Lily cries out in joy as she spots the city of Yublum in the distance. Finally, after so many hardships, they have both reached their destination. The majestic city looms before their eyes. Lily turns to the skeleton knight, determinedly stating that this time it is her turn to protect him. Lily explains that since the skeleton knight cannot roam the city freely, she will be the one to go inside. The skeleton knight cannot help but worry, asking if Lily will be alright going in alone. Lily confidently asserts that she will be fine, as whatever she does is nothing compared to the help the skeleton knight has given her. Lily waves goodbye, telling the skeleton knight to wait for her return. The skeleton knight stands there, silently watching as Lily's figure gradually fades from sight. Time passes an hour, then a day, and then 3 long, agonizing days slip by as the skeleton knight waits. Beneath the fiery red sunset, the skeleton knight stood silently, gazing at the lifeless body lying on the ground. The skeleton knight couldn't hide his frustration, blaming himself for failing once again to protect someone in need. Memories of Lily flooded back, her passing left an agonizing void. Meanwhile, Necron and the bald man approached the spot, completely unaware of the knight's presence. Necron looked annoyed, not expecting that Lily would choose to take her own life. The bald man replied, mocking the cruelty of someone who had beaten Lily mercilessly as if she were nothing more than an animal. The bald man continued to whine about losing a valuable piece of merchandise before he could sell it for profit. The skeleton knight watched silently from the bushes, listening to every disgusting confession from Necron and his companion. Words like suicide and merchandise left the skeleton knight stunned, and his fury began to ignite. The bald man kept rambling, regretting that he had to discard the merchandise before doing anything with it. Necron scolded him, urging the man to quickly return to the inn to settle the bill with the landlord. Necron began to approach the bushes where the skeleton knight was hiding, a smug expression on his face. Necron noticed something, a sinister smile appeared on his face as he stepped closer. Necron stood looming over Lily's body, preparing to commit his next despicable act. The skeleton knight could bear it no longer, he drew his sword from its scabbard, preparing for a purge. As bloodlust radiated from him, Necron turned around, his smile slowly freezing on his face. Skeleton knight suddenly appeared right behind Necron, delivering a lethal strike. The sharp blade pierced through Necron's body, putting an end to his arrogance. Overwhelming agony struck, and Necron shrieked as he was impaled by the skeleton knight. A heart-wrenching scream echoed throughout the forest, and fresh blood gushed from Necron's mouth. The skeleton knight leaned close to Necron's ear, ordering him to stay silent if he wanted to keep his life. Necron was in a state of utter panic, he couldn't believe that the one who attacked him was a talking skeleton. The skeleton knight pressed his blade deeper, forcing Necron to answer his questions. The pain became unbearable, and Necron's breath began to hitch. The skeleton knight glared at Necron, his patience completely exhausted. Terrified of death, Necron hurriedly raised his hands in surrender, promising to do whatever the knight demanded. The skeleton knight pointed directly at Lily's body, demanding an explanation as to why she had been left in this place. In his panic, Necron stammered a confession that it was the innkeeper who had brought Lily to them. Lily had collapsed in critical condition, leaving behind haunting doubts about the true perpetrator of this crime. The corrupt guard trembled as he confessed, shifting all the blame onto orders from his superiors. The skeleton knight did not hesitate, interrogating the corrupt guard about his brutal actions. The corrupt guard stammered, fear written all over his face as he was backed into a corner. Without allowing the guard to justify himself, the skeleton knight delivered a final, lethal strike to finish him off. The corrupt guard slumped to the ground, the skeleton knight standing silently behind him with a blood-stained sword. The gaze of the corrupt guard slowly lost focus as his life slipped away. Seeing the true form of the skeleton knight, the corrupt guard was filled with shock before taking his final breath. In the blood-soaked scene, the skeleton knight stood between the living and the dead. The skeleton knight remained emotionless, continuing to execute justice in his own way. The dry sound of the skeleton knight's footsteps echoed through the silence. The skeleton knight pauses, his hollow eyes gazing into the distance. Skeleton knight leans down to check Lily's condition, a flicker of concern evident in his actions. Lily remains lying there, her breathing weak but still holding on to hope. The skeleton knight recounts the final testimony. The mastermind behind the incident is none other than the innkeeper. Night falls, and the cold moonlight illuminates the path leading to the inn. The skeleton knight silently advances toward the building, with a heavy silence blanketing the entire area. Bald man cracks the door open, peering out suspiciously upon hearing strange noises in the dead of night. Before he can react, the bald man is struck with immense force by the skeleton knight and slammed to the floor. The impact sends the bald man sprawling, while the skeleton knight looms right at the doorway. In pain and panic, the bald man clutches his chest, unable to comprehend what is happening. The skeleton knight stands towering before him, a crushing pressure weighing down on the bald man's shoulders. In a state of sheer terror, the bald man pleads for mercy, insisting he had already confessed everything beforehand. The skeleton knight coldly interrogates the bald man regarding the fate of the 2 organization members who kidnapped Lord Erast's daughter. The bald man screams, clutching his head, denying any involvement with those individuals. The skeleton knight remains unflinching, maintaining a terrifyingly calm demeanor. Realizing something is wrong, the bald man is shocked to discover that the skeleton knight does not belong to that organization. The skeleton knight's bony hand grips the bald man's head tightly, forcing him into submission. The bald man trembles, his eyes revealing sheer horror as he faces the imminent death looming from the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight issues a brief command, forbidding the bald man from uttering any nonsense. The skeleton knight coldly questions the corrupt guard about the whereabouts of the Lord's daughter, who went missing 3 days ago. The corrupt guard trembles, sweat pouring down his face as the skeleton knight demands to know if he was an accomplice in Lily's group. The corrupt guard stammers an admission that he belonged to that unfortunate girl's group and confirms she is dead, making the skeleton knight even more determined to uncover the truth. Unable to keep his composure, the corrupt guard screams in extreme panic as he is pushed into a corner. The skeleton knight does not hesitate, his bony hand tightens around the hilt of his sword, ready to enforce justice through violence. A fatal strike descends, blood splattering to stain the wooden floor crimson as the skeleton knight punishes the corrupt guard instantly. A harrowing scream rings out, the corrupt guard clutches his painful wound, blood streaming down his leg. The corrupt guard's eyes roll back in agony as he completely collapses under the overwhelming power of the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight leans in close, growling as he demands the cause of the girl's death, forcing the corrupt guard to beg for his life in fear. With eyes burning with hatred, the skeleton knight threatens further torment if the corrupt guard does not confess everything. The corrupt guard weeps bitterly, claiming he only handed the girl over to the guards and had no idea they would murder her. In his panic, the corrupt guard reveals a horrifying secret: the guards are forced to hand girls over to the Necron organization to be used as slaves. The moment the name Necron is uttered, the skeleton knight freezes, a surge of killing intent radiating from his skeletal frame. Suddenly, a pitch-black entity, like a ghostly serpent, emerges from the corrupt guard's throat, causing him to choke. The entity coils tightly around the corrupt guard's throat, preventing him from further exposing such earth-shattering secrets. The skeleton knight observes the bizarre phenomenon, realizing it is a form of a cruel, forbidden curse. The curse continues to tighten, the corrupt guard struggles in despair as the name Necron becomes his own death sentence. The connection between the corrupt guard and the Necron organization is gradually revealed as a dark conspiracy consumes everything. The skeleton knight muses on his current weakness, unable to fully stop these evildoers yet. The skeleton knight's gaze shifts toward the display armor, and a new decision begins to take shape. Skeleton knight's bony hand gently touches the armor, sensing the potential power hidden within. Lily happily suggests that the skeleton knight should put on that armor to prepare for the journey ahead. The skeleton knight tries on the armor, his imposing figure beginning to emerge from behind the steel plating. With eyes glowing intensely within his sockets, the skeleton knight seems ready for a new purge. The skeleton knight walks away with determination, leaving the corrupted guard lying motionless behind him. Footsteps echo on the wooden floor as the skeleton knight moves steadily toward the light at the exit. With his helmet obscuring his face, the skeleton knight has now completely transformed into a true knight. Standing at the threshold, the skeleton knight wonders if it is time for him to depart and fulfill his mission. A smile of the Grim Reaper? No, this is the mark of a reincarnation curse where death itself is shattered and an ancient power begins to stir. A warrior in majestic dark purple armor, the skeleton knight unleashes a devastating strike, piercing a dry skeleton with his glowing sword. Fragments fly wildly around the skeleton knight's helmet, showcasing the sheer power of that blow, or perhaps a transformation taking place. The skeleton knight stands tall, his sword still shimmering, while a shattered skull lies beneath his feet, the telltale sign of a completely annihilated foe. He lets out a faint hoo after the battle, perhaps assessing the situation or catching his breath. The scene shifts to a gloomy cave with sharp stalactites hanging down and vines clinging to the walls, creating an atmosphere filled with mystery and danger. Clatter of footsteps echoes through the cave as the skeleton knight continues his journey, advancing deep into the encroaching darkness. The skeleton knight wonders if this is the house of bones of the ghost he is searching for, as a faint purple light glows ahead. He observes his surroundings with vigilance, his invisible gaze piercing through the slits of his helmet to scan the new environment. Another clatter sounds, and the skeleton knight notices a massive, dismembered skeletal frame scattered across the ground. Skeleton Knight's gaze locks onto what just appeared, stuttering, What on earth is this? It strides out, a complete dry skeleton, equipped with sword and shield, accompanied by a ghostly uhu that pierces right into the Skeleton Knight's ears. The Skeleton Knight scratches his head, wondering if this dungeon has even more skeletons, truly an awkward situation. But when he calls out, the other responds with a cautious OOH, making all suspicion seem to vanish. The Skeleton Knight removes his helmet, revealing his own bony face, and declares that he is also a skeleton and has no intention of harming his own kind. The other skeleton stares in astonishment at the Skeleton Knight, wondering if he ever looked like that before meeting the Succubus Queen, and regrets that he cannot speak. The Skeleton Knight turns his head, deciding that he should find a different dungeon to continue his exploration. He bids farewell to the other skeleton, turns his back, and walks away, wanting to avoid further trouble. Just as he turns his back, a system notification bing, "Dungeon boss has appeared," makes the Skeleton Knight freeze. Huh? The Skeleton Knight's eyes widen in shock. He cannot believe what he just heard. A name that makes even the other skeleton go rigid? Dungeon boss? He can't believe his ears. A giant dry skeleton, with horns on its head and a glowing blue chest, wielding a massive weapon and shield, emerges with a powerful presence. It is the dungeon boss. The Skeleton Knight's head tilts slightly, emitting the familiar clatter sound as he prepares to face the new challenge. The dungeon boss lunges to attack. The Skeleton Knight quickly draws his sword to counter, while the frail skeleton is also dragged into the fray. Wait a minute, what kind of farce are you trying to pull in the middle of this chaos? The dungeon boss doesn't stop, slamming a heavy blow into the ground, sending a shockwave rippling through the area. The Skeleton Knight bellows in anger. How dare you do that to a fellow skeleton, witnessing the frail skeleton being violently attacked. In a fit of rage, the Skeleton Knight charges straight into the swarm of attacking skeletons, determined to protect the weak. He stares intently at the dungeon boss, his voice filled with menace. Don't say I didn't warn you. The Skeleton Knight quickly swings his sword, countering two skeletons rushing at him, beginning an unrelenting battle. Continuing his counterattack, the Skeleton Knight unleashes a powerful sweeping slash. The two skeletons are sent flying into the air, their bodies shattering into pieces. But instantly, he notices something unusual, an expression of surprise evident on his helmet. A surprise attack strikes the Skeleton Knight directly, sending him flying backward. It turns out, a giant skeleton with horns and a glowing chest is standing tall, ready to deliver the finishing blow. Even though he was blindsided, the Skeleton Knight maintains his composure, coldly challenging, "Oh, so you want to cross blades with me?" The giant skeleton lets out a fierce roar, swinging its massive mace downward, but the Skeleton Knight nimbly dodges. The mace strikes the ground with terrifying force, creating a deep crater right next to where the Skeleton Knight had just fallen. Not giving his opponent a moment to react, the Skeleton Knight springs up, swinging his sword to create a sharp blue energy arc. This critical strike causes the giant skeleton to roar in agony as the blue energy engulfs its skull. The Skeleton Knight is satisfied with his last move, whispering to himself, "Not bad." He doesn't stop, continuing to lunge into the attack. After a flash of combat, the Skeleton Knight was sent flying to the ground, but at the same time, the skeletal monster paid the price with a severed leg. Giant skeleton roared in despair as one of its legs had been incapacitated. The Skeleton Knight stood up, looked at his opponent, and said sarcastically, "All right then, I guess I was too optimistic thinking you would calm down just after losing a leg." Despite his injuries, the skeleton roared madly, raising his mace, aiming to crush the Skeleton Knight. The giant mace came crashing down like a bolt from the blue, but the Skeleton Knight was one step faster. He suddenly leaped, landing squarely on the skeleton's skull, creating a massive shockwave. From above, the Skeleton Knight continued, "I hate to say this, but I know all too well where a skeleton's weakness lies." He raised his sword high, preparing to deliver the final blow. A critical strike pierced straight down, tearing through the ground with a blinding blue surge of energy. The giant skeleton let out one final shriek before collapsing, its body disintegrating into ashes following the Skeleton Knight's finishing move. Immediately after, a series of level-up notifications echoed continuously before the Skeleton Knight's eyes. He was surprised to realize he had leveled up 5 times after just a single battle. The Skeleton Knight fell into deep thought, a realization flashing through his mind. A new quest suddenly appeared: swing the sword 10,000 times, with the reward being swordsmanship skill level 1. The Skeleton Knight wondered, is this a skill? He was surprised that the quest was as simple as just swinging his sword. As soon as he tried swinging his sword once, the system registered it. The Skeleton Knight realized, I just need to swing the sword 10,000 times and my swordsmanship skill will increase. With a body made of bone, he doesn't need to eat or sleep, which makes the Skeleton Knight confident that he can complete the task quickly. Now, with the master of this dungeon also defeated, the Skeleton Knight wonders if he should spend some time training here. A firm voice rang out, guiding the way, signaling that they had reached their destination. The agile feet of a woman glided over the grass, heading deep into the dense forest. Immediately after, a red-haired woman looked worriedly, timidly asking if she would be okay facing the dangers ahead. But the skeleton knight immediately reassured her with a confident smile, promising to always be by her side to protect her. And then, the blonde girl, with eyes full of curiosity and a mischievous smile on her lips, spoke up, inviting everyone to move inside. It seemed she was ready for whatever lay in wait. The skeleton knight is diligently training in the dark dungeon. He realizes that this mission is far more grueling than he had initially anticipated. Just a split second of distraction or a minor technical error, and the system will refuse to acknowledge his progress. The skeleton knight must maintain intense focus to complete his 10,000 sword swings. Even so, the skeleton knight has made significant progress. He wonders if he is truly on the right path. Suddenly, a bright red alert window from the system flashes with an urgent warning. An intruder has appeared inside the dungeon. The skeleton knight is stunned by the unexpected notification. What kind of intruder would dare to set foot in this place? At the same time, a group of people is venturing into the dungeon. The male guard leading the way confidently tells Rubia and Yenu that they are lucky to be traveling with him. The male guard brags that this dungeon is crawling with skeletons and is extremely dangerous, but with his protection, there is nothing to worry about. Rubia looks anxious, cautiously telling the male guard that she is terrified of getting hurt when facing monsters. The male guard laughs heartily, telling Rubia and Yenu just to stand back and watch. He excitedly bends down to rummage through his bag to retrieve something. The male guard pulls out precious healing potions, confidently declaring that he will heal Rubia and Yenu if anything goes wrong. Rubia cannot help but be amazed by the number of expensive healing potions the male guard possesses. Rubia exclaims in admiration, while the male guard remains smug about his own plan. The male guard doesn't forget to flirt, implying that the extent of his help depends on how enthusiastically Rubia and Yenu cheer for him. Rubia secretly thinks the male guard is so predictable. She smiles mockingly at his foolishness while Yenu stands by observing. Yenu sneers in contempt, silently calculating the value of the assets the male guard is carrying. Yenu silently mocks Rubia as an old fox trying to cozy up to the male guard while she waits for the right moment to strike them both. Yenu wears a sinister smile, telling herself that all those assets will sooner or later belong to her. Yenu feigns obedience, complimenting the male guard and turning to ask Rubia a question to maintain her perfect cover. Rubia isn't about to lose. She skillfully pushes the responsibility of leading the way onto Yenu in her capacity as an adventurer. Yenu agrees with a strained smile, but deep down, she is cursing and vowing to kill Rubia the moment she gets a chance. The male guard frantically intervenes, trying to diffuse the tense atmosphere between Rubia and Yenu. The male guard confidently shows off his weapon, asserting that this dungeon is filled only with weak, dry bones and that he is prepared thoroughly. The male guard daydreams about showing off his prowess in front of Rubia and Yenu, but he finds it strange that he hasn't seen a single monster. Yenu asks the male guard a bewildered question, casting doubt on his previous claim that the dungeon was swarming with skeletons. Rubia also starts to feel suspicious, remarking that they have been in this dungeon for quite a while now. The male guard breaks into a cold sweat, justifying that they are only at the entrance while silently worrying if a major purge has just taken place. Just then, Rubia screams in surprise upon seeing something up ahead. Before them lie piles of monster bones scattered about, evidence of a battle that has just concluded. Rubia, Yenu, and the male guard stare in astonishment at the massive pile of bones lying on the ground. A brutal fight has just ended here. The male guard cannot hide his confusion, exclaiming in bewilderment as he realizes the monsters were already wiped out. Rubia approaches and touches the monster carcass. She wonders if someone else beat them to the punch in raiding this place. The male guard pulls his hair, feeling that his luck is truly terrible for arriving here only to find nothing left to harvest. Yenu grips her dagger tightly. She decides she must seize this opportunity to act while the skeleton knight is off guard. Sound of heavy footsteps rings out clearly. A hulking figure appears before the group of Rubia, Yenu, and the male guard. The male guard jumps back in surprise, brandishing his weapon and shouting to challenge the skeleton knight who has emerged from the shadows. The skeleton knight stands tall, his deep purple armor radiating a murderous aura that seems to thicken the air. The male guard, still shaken, continues to demand the skeleton knight's identity and whether he was the one who annihilated the monster. Rubia and Yenu stare intensely at the skeleton knight, covered in suspicion as they fail to understand why a warrior would stand there without attacking. The male guard cannot believe his eyes, mocking the absurdity of a skeleton wearing iron armor. The skeleton knight speaks up, his cold voice asserting his control over the maze and ordering the group to leave immediately. The male guard sighs in relief, chuckling to himself as he realizes the skeleton knight might actually be human, and he feels confident he won't have to fight. Male guard turns toward Rubia and Yenu, trying to project authority as he prepares to order the skeleton knight around. Yenu loses her composure, pointing a finger directly at the skeleton knight and berating him for his lack of respect. Yenu continues to threaten the skeleton knight, demanding that he hand over every item he collected in the dungeon. Yena turns to look at the male guard with hopeful eyes, believing he will step up to teach the skeleton knight a lesson. The male guard turns pale, cold sweat beading on his forehead under the pressure radiating from the skeleton knight. The male guard tries to regain his courage, shouting at the skeleton knight about basic manners. The skeleton knight responds with an enigmatic remark, seemingly fed up with the annoyance this group is causing. Yena sneers, secretly thinking this is a golden opportunity to weaken the skeleton knight and seize his precious items. Rubia, Yeno, and the male guard all jump in shock as the skeleton knight suddenly makes an unexpected move. Yenu's eyes widen in absolute horror as she witnesses the terrifying truth unfolding before her. The skeleton knight removes his helmet, revealing a ghastly white skull and turning the atmosphere deathly cold. Rubia, Yeno, and the male guard are completely stunned, realizing they are facing an entity that is clearly not human. Rubia tremblingly warns the male guard, but he stubbornly laughs it off, refusing to believe in the danger the skeleton knight poses. The male guard swings his arm, preparing to attack while maintaining a look of utter contempt for the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight remains calm, offering one final warning to the man who is actively seeking his own death. The male guard screams with excitement, charging forward with his weapon in hopes of proving his prowess. With a smug smile, the male guard believes this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to make a name for himself. Not content with just threats, he proudly brandishes a consecrated flail specifically designed to destroy opponents like the skeleton knight. Facing such arrogance, the skeleton knight coldly replies with a brief final warning. Without giving the skeleton knight a chance to react, the male guard yells and lunges, swinging his weapon directly at him. The male guard is stunned to realize his attack had absolutely no effect, his expression shifting to one of utter disbelief. Clenching his weapon tight, the skeleton knight prepares for a lightning-fast counterattack aimed at the male guard. The male guard falters under the pressure from the skeleton knight, completely losing his initial bravado. The skeleton knight stares straight at the male guard, his powerful voice repeating the final piece of advice. Piercing scream echoes throughout the cave while Yena stands frozen, witnessing the horrific scene unfolding between the skeleton knight and the male guard. In the pitch-black depths of the dungeon, the skeleton knight's eyes flared with murderous intent. The skeleton knight stood coldly, watching his enemy writhing at his feet in extreme agony. The defeated foe collapsed, face twisted in terror and pain, his breath reduced to nothing but weak, agonizing moans. The skeleton knight let out a cold snort, his patience had completely run out. Yena trembled, her eyes widening in panic as she witnessed the bloody spectacle before her. Yena screamed in desperation, trying to flee from the deadly presence of the skeleton knight. A sharp blade flashed through the air, cutting across the space and finishing off the one attempting to escape. The skeleton knight was stunned, never expecting Yena to act with such ruthless cruelty. The skeleton knight tightened his grip on his sword, his eyes burning as he sentenced the perpetrator to death. The tension reached a breaking point as the skeleton knight and Yena locked eyes, every movement heavy with bloodlust. Realizing the massive gap in their power, Yenu immediately knelt and begged for her life. Skeleton knight paused, visible surprise etched across his face. Yenu introduced herself as a member of the TNT Guild, an organization specializing in assassination and intelligence. The skeleton knight questioned her cruel actions, wondering if that had been Yenu's true objective all along. Skeleton knight maintained his combat stance, never lowering his guard against Yenu's explanation. Yenu nonchalantly admitted to killing the other party to avoid trouble for the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight refused to accept such a defense, he had no desire to kill without cause. Yena smiled calculatingly, claiming the man was not her ally and that she had intended to kill him from the start. Upon hearing this, the skeleton knight could only sigh at the brutality of the TNT Guild. The skeleton knight ordered Yenu to leave at once, granting her a path to survival. Yena seized the opportunity, trying to convince the skeleton knight that she could be of use to him. The skeleton knight coldly refused, demanding that Yena vanish from his sight. But at the mention of information, the skeleton knight suddenly paused, his curiosity piqued. Yenu excitedly asserted that her guild held every kind of information anyone could ever need. The skeleton knight seriously inquired about Nicron society, the very thing he was searching for. Yenu looked thoughtful, admitting it was high-level information but one she could certainly provide. Yenu proposed a condition for the exchange, a deal the skeleton knight would find hard to refuse. The skeleton knight demanded that Yenu clarify what that condition was. The skeleton knight pressed his blade against Yenu's neck, reminding her that simply sparing her life was already a favor. Yenu nodded tremblingly, suggesting that the skeleton knight should join the guild to obtain the information he desired. The skeleton knight remained unfazed, meeting Yenu's suggestive proposal with his trademark cold demeanor. The skeleton knight pondered, would ending Yenu right now cost him the vital information he desperately craved? With no other options, the skeleton knight agreed to compromise and set his own prerequisite for them to become allies. Suddenly, a system notification appeared before his eyes, confirming that a new quest had been triggered. The Skeleton Knight was stunned, his red eyes fixed on the info panel that had just materialized. The quest details appeared clearly, requiring the Skeleton Knight to appoint Yenu as the branch manager of the TNT Guild to initiate the next sequence of events. The Skeleton Knight recognized the terrifying similarity to the old script, but now he understood better than ever information was what he needed most. Yena spoke up, interrupting the Skeleton Knight's train of thought, looking worried as she saw him lost in his own mind. Yena quickly seized the moment, promising to support the Skeleton Knight's training if he accepted her offer. The Skeleton Knight's only response was an iron grip around Yenu's neck, leaving her no room to react. The Skeleton Knight coldly exposes the cruelty of Yenu, who is willing to strike down their own kind just to serve personal interests. The Skeleton Knight does not want to place trust in someone who could stab them in the back at any moment. Yenu tries to remain calm, forcing a strained smile while struggling to catch their breath. Yenu asserts that, in essence, Yenu and the Skeleton Knight are much more alike than the Skeleton Knight thinks. The Skeleton Knight lets go, and Yenu collapses to the ground, coughing violently after narrowly escaping death. Skeleton Knight stands there, watching Yenu struggle for air, and challenges Yenu to explain that supposed similarity. Yenu bitterly confesses that humanity has never considered Yenu human, they only ever judged Yenu by their appearance. The Skeleton Knight falls silent, realizing the heartbreaking truth that both A and Yenu are outcasts rejected by this world. Yena digs deeper into the Skeleton Knight's emotional wounds, forcing the Skeleton Knight to question their own position. Yeno continues to lead the Skeleton Knight into the dark secrets of Necron society. Human trafficking operations and bloodstained transactions made for profit are gradually laid bare. The miserable and downtrodden are kept in chains, treated as mere commodities in the hands of the powerful. Yenu admits that Yenu does not know the true identity of the organization's leader, as that information is reserved only for those at the highest level. Yenu makes a final proposal, wanting the Skeleton Knight to hunt humans just as they hunt monsters. Yenu promises to lure assassination targets into this labyrinth, helping the Skeleton Knight gain experience and advance within the guild. Skeleton Knight nods in agreement. A mutually beneficial deal has been officially established. The Skeleton Knight contemplates, carefully considering the price of this collaboration. The Skeleton Knight decides to double-check with Yenu one more time before setting the plan in motion. Skeleton Knight asks directly whether Yenu would truly have no hesitation in helping them finish off their own kind. Yenu offers a cold smile, firmly asserting that Yenu despises humanity to the marrow of their bones. The Skeleton Knight accepts Yenu's calculated offer with a cold-blooded response. A system notification rings out. A group of 3 intruders has appeared within the labyrinth. Without giving the opponents a chance to react, the Skeleton Knight swings his sword with precision, striking down the first intruder. The Skeleton Knight coldly retracts his blade, the light in his hollow eye sockets remaining completely unmoved. Beneath his luxurious deep purple armor, the Skeleton Knight maintains an imposing and majestic combat stance. The remaining intruder draws his bow, muttering bitterly as he watches his comrade get taken down by the Skeleton Knight. Before he can even loose an arrow, he lets out a cry of agony as he suffers a fatal blow from the Skeleton Knight. At that very moment, Yenu appears from behind, coldly observing the intruder collapsing on the ground. Yena flashes a smirk, her hand gesturing slightly toward the target. A powerful kick lands, catching the enemy off guard and leaving him screaming in despair. He collapses, struggling to get up while questioning the deadly trap that the Skeleton Knight and Yena had set. Not letting him utter another word, the Skeleton Knight delivers a swift finishing blow. The intruder's eyes roll back and his life fades in an instant. Yena sits down on the ground, staring at the sword the Skeleton Knight just plunged into the floor, a look of lingering shock on her face. The Skeleton Knight stands tall like a statue, shrouded in a mysterious purple aura. Yena chuckles softly, satisfied with the results of their hunt. The system notifies that the Skeleton Knight has leveled up. His labyrinth synchronization has increased and his swordsmanship skill has reached level 4. The Skeleton Knight looks at the notification panel, thinking to himself that the leveling speed is gradually slowing down after months of diligent work. The Skeleton Knight considers moving to a different area, while Yenu excitedly shows off the loot they just collected. Strewn across the ground are various items gathered from the unfortunate souls over the past week. Yenu proudly boasts that it was all thanks to her efforts in luring those people here. The Skeleton Knight remains silent, prompting an annoyed Yenu to tell him not to act so self-righteous. Yenu continues to explain that these people were all criminals and killing them wouldn't even fetch much of a bounty. With an angry expression, Yenu insists they were just trash who used bribes to evade the law. The Skeleton Knight leans down to inspect some strange books they just acquired, ignoring Yenu's outburst. The Skeleton Knight picks up a book titled The Ugly Mage, wondering if the author has some grudge against mages. The Skeleton Knight closes the book, feeling suspicious about the contents inside. The author's name, Kevin Ashton, catches the Skeleton Knight's eye, catching him slightly off guard. Unexpectedly, the system announces that the Skeleton Knight's intelligence stat has just increased by 1 point. The Skeleton Knight diligently digs through the pile of items on the ground. Yahello stands nearby, observing his inexplicable actions. Yahello looks blank, her eyes filled with confusion at the Skeleton Knight's intense focus. The Skeleton Knight exhales, sitting down on the floor after finishing his inspection of the old books. In the Skeleton Knight's hands are 2 rare books capable of increasing intelligence stats, valuable pieces of knowledge within this labyrinth. The Skeleton Knight realizes that both books share the same author, Kevin Ashton, and reading them has truly helped boost his intelligence. The Skeleton Knight reflects that while intelligence stats are not easy to raise, reading books provides an unexpected effect. Yahello approaches him, and the atmosphere between the two suddenly becomes intimate. Yahello leans in close to the Skeleton Knight, prompting him to tell her to back away because she is too close. Yahello smiles, offering to help the Skeleton Knight travel to the village to look for more books. The Skeleton Knight silently admires Yahello's keen sense, but he has a more important issue to resolve. The Skeleton Knight asks Yahello about the nearest labyrinths in the area to prepare for their next journey. Yahello lists the potential dungeons, ranging from E rank to C rank, all within a week's travel. Skeleton Knight double-checks with Yahello whether the distance is calculated based on overland travel. Skeleton Knight considers testing his strength in an E rank dungeon, seeing it as a logical step forward after conquering the F rank one. Skeleton Knight gives Yahello instructions on the plan for the next time she returns to the village. Watching Yahello drift off to sleep beside him, Skeleton Knight can't help but feel a sense of relief. Skeleton Knight understands the exhaustion Yahello feels after those long trips between the dungeon and the village. Skeleton Knight decides to return to practicing his swordsmanship while he waits. System sound chimes, signaling an unexpected change for Skeleton Knight. As a wave of fatigue washes over him, Skeleton Knight wonders if he should pause and take a rest. The system warns Skeleton Knight that he has been in the dungeon for too long, causing his compatibility to rise and his human nature to slowly reawaken. In a hazy state, Skeleton Knight wonders if he has truly fallen asleep. Skeleton Knight is puzzled, as a skeleton like him shouldn't be able to sleep at all. A mysterious voice speaks up, asking Skeleton Knight about his dream. Rubia appears, she approaches and embraces Skeleton Knight, leaving him stunned. Skeleton Knight panics, stammering Rubia's name as he recognizes her. Rubia smiles enigmatically, remarking that she shouldn't have woken Skeleton Knight from that deep sleep. Skeleton Knight waves his hands frantically, attempting to dismiss the awkward situation. Skeleton Knight still cannot believe his eyes, stammering about Rubia's presence. Skeleton Knight frantically checks his armor, his shock reflected in his glowing eye sockets as he notices something unusual. While Skeleton Knight is still bewildered, Rubia suddenly hugs him tight, gently comforting him to dispel the encroaching fear. Rubia leans in close, whispering to Skeleton Knight that she thought he was having a beautiful dream, but it was actually a terrifying nightmare. Rubia flashes an enigmatic smile as she softly asks about the story she will tell Skeleton Knight today. Rubia grips Skeleton Knight's hand tightly, feeling a sense of safety and relief in knowing that everything is still okay. Rubia takes Skeleton Knight's hand, and together they head deeper into the dungeon, where they continue their journey full of mysteries. The sound of Skeleton Knight and Rubia's footsteps echoes steadily through the silent dungeon, signaling a long journey ahead. Skeleton Knight walks ahead sullenly, his shadow stretching long on the rocky ground, fading into the deep darkness of the dungeon. Yahello wakes up from her slumber, dazed and questioning what had just happened. Yahello bolts upright in a panic, her voice trembling as she frantically calls out for her protector, the Skeleton Knight. In the heart of the deadly labyrinth, Yahello collapses, feeling lost amidst the cold air enveloping the darkness. Yahello scans her surroundings, her face etched with clear unease. Yahello gently touches the skull of the Skeleton Knight, confirming the presence of her companion. Rubia sits silently beside the Skeleton Knight, both lost in wordless contemplation. Yahello quietly reflects on the strange dream she just had, wondering if it was truly just a dream. The sensation was so terrifyingly real that Yahello couldn't stop pondering it. Yahello reassures herself that it doesn't matter anymore. Rubia looks at Yahello with deep understanding, feeling relieved to see that she is still safe. Rubia closes the book and softly asks about Yahello's apparent boredom. The Skeleton Knight is startled and hastily denies Rubia's suspicions. Rubia continues to press, wanting the Skeleton Knight to finish recounting the incomplete dream. Rubia is curious about the girl the Skeleton Knight encountered in his dream. Yahello stretches her body, decisively shaking off her drowsiness to venture into the treacherous wild forest. Yahello observes the forest, wondering if she should push deeper inside. A strange noise makes Yahello jump and look back. A mysterious army appears, grabbing everyone's attention. The commander speaks in a stern voice, declaring the true purpose of this conquest. The commander warns of the mysterious disappearances that have been occurring in this dungeon for the past half-year. The situation becomes even more grave as the conquest is led by the Blue Lion Knights themselves. Yeno realizes that the situation is taking a turn for the worse. Rubia listens to the story, showing that she understands the gravity of the situation. Rubia gives an enigmatic smile when mentioning Yenu's excessive enthusiasm. The skeleton knight admits to the annoyance caused by Yenu's overly energetic personality. Rubia coldly asks if the skeleton knight would abandon Yenu to die. The skeleton knight is stunned when a system notification suddenly appears with a warning. Bright red notification flashes: an intruder has entered the dungeon. Painful memories of past failure come flooding back. The skeleton knight cannot forget the moment he helplessly watched his comrades fall. Gritting his teeth, the skeleton knight swears to himself that those wretched knights will never have the chance to repeat that crime ever again. This time, with sword in hand, the skeleton knight is determined to protect Yenu at any cost. Deep in the dark dungeon, Yenu suddenly appears, rushing to catch up with the skeleton knight who was sitting listlessly on a rock. Seeing the skeleton knight so relaxed, Yenu can't hide her anxiety and hurriedly urges him to act immediately. The skeleton knight's eyes flare with purple, murderous flames. He knows time is running out and they must leave at once. As the skeleton knight stands up, he tries to warn Yenu about the enemies surrounding the dungeon entrance. Yenu looks at the skeleton knight, confused, while he continues to repeat his promise to protect her like a madman. Noticing his erratic behavior, Yenu is filled with bewilderment and keeps asking what is really happening to him. The skeleton knight grips his sword hilt, his bony hand trembling from an uncontrollable outburst of intense emotion. Without a word of explanation, the skeleton knight suddenly lunges with a powerful strike toward Yenu, making her scream in terror. Yenu recoils in fear, unable to understand why the skeleton knight has suddenly become so aggressive and out of control. It feels as though the skeleton knight is being possessed by some sort of force. Yenu fearfully wonders if she has unintentionally offended him. An arrow suddenly streaks out from the shadows, signaling that pursuers are closing in. The arrow slams into the ground right at Yenu's feet, leaving her startled and panicked by the precarious situation. The enemy scout unit has located them, shouting to alert their main force about the presence of the monster and the witch. Yenu grits her teeth in frustration, realizing the scouts were faster than expected, forcing both of them into a confrontation. Seeing the skeleton knight still in an unstable state, Yenu worries to herself that he is currently in no condition to fight. Yenu dodges the skeleton knight's next attack, desperately calling his name in the hope that he will regain his senses. As Yenu attempts to calm the skeleton knight down, Rubia suddenly appears, interrupting the chaos between them. Rubia stares coldly at the skeleton knight, sarcastically questioning the insane actions he just committed. The skeleton knight explains that he did it only to protect Rubia from the approaching soldiers, but his attitude only makes things worse. Lily suddenly interjects, bitterly confronting the skeleton knight about why he abandoned her to die in the past. The skeleton knight is stunned when he hears the name Rubia mentioned. Fragmented memories begin to piece themselves together within his empty eye sockets. The skeleton knight collapses to the ground, completely broken by the cruel truth unfolding before his eyes. Lily approaches him, twisting the knife into the skeleton knight's pain by reminding him of the promise to protect that he failed to keep. The skeleton knight tries to justify his failure, but Rubia and Lily refuse to let him be, relentlessly pressuring him with cruel questions. Rubia whispers into the skeleton knight's ear, her smile full of contempt, as if to crush the last shred of his hope. Rubia bluntly declares that the skeleton knight's failure was simply because he was too weak, causing him to spiral into total despair. Lily and Rubia take turns berating and blaming the skeleton knight for every tragedy, leaving him to agonizingly admit his own weakness. Tormented by guilt, the skeleton knight can only clutch his head as he sinks into the abyss. He blames himself, consumed by the realization that his weakness made him unable to protect anyone. Amidst the forest, the guard rushes toward Arthur, his voice full of urgency as he calls out to grab his attention. Tension evident in his eyes, the guard reports the emergency situation, stating that the scouts have successfully pinpointed the target's location. Hearing the grave news, Arthur turns calmly, his sharp gaze revealing his resolve for the battle ahead. Amidst the deep, murky waters, the skeleton knight is gradually sinking into the void. The knight orders his soldiers to fire, determined not to let the target escape. Yenu ducks behind a boulder, but the relentless barrage of arrows leaves her cornered. Meanwhile, the skeleton knight remains motionless, as if still trapped in a comatose state. With no other choice, Yenu is forced to prepare her final plan for self-defense. The knight urges his soldiers to drive Yenu into a corner. A smoke bomb is thrown to the ground, signaling the moment of counterattack. The soldiers are confused by the strange object that has just appeared at their feet. One soldier screams in panic, ordering his comrades to stay back. Seizing the opportunity, Yenu grabs the lifeless skeleton knight and lunges straight into the smoke and fire. The skeleton knight twitches slightly, his joints clashing to create a dry, rattling sound. Yenu plots to lure the knight deep into the maze and use a smoke bomb to make her escape. But a sudden sword strike cuts through, putting an end to Yenu's plan. Knight steps forward, coldly shutting down all of Yenu's tricks. The knight announces that Yennu is under arrest for the murder of the adventurers. Yenna frantically calls out to the skeleton knight, hoping for his assistance. The skeleton knight continues to stand silently without the slightest reaction. The knight realizes the truth about Yennu's ability to summon souls. The knight orders his soldiers to destroy the thing standing next to Yennu first. Yennu is horrified to see the knight's blade aimed directly at the skeleton knight. In that very moment, a flicker of awareness ignites within the skeleton knight's hollow eyes. A vague sensation washes over the skeleton knight, making him question his own existence. The skeleton knight believes he was in the afterlife where he once met Rubia and the succubus. Nevertheless, the skeleton knight feels relieved to have seen them one last time before fading away. Skeleton knight quietly contemplates the illusoriness of reality. The skeleton knight is stunned, wondering if he has truly died or not. No, the skeleton knight realizes he must be resurrected. Everything was just an illusion. The skeleton knight resolves to grow stronger to protect his future master. With iron will, the skeleton knight awakens, ready for the battle to defend his master. As a drop of blood falls, the skeleton knight awakens to a harsh and cruel reality. Yenna gasps for breath in a pool of blood, whispering a haunting name. The knight sneers, mocking Yennu's exhaustion. Skeleton knight embraces Yennu while vicious arrows remain embedded in her body. The skeleton knight is shattered by the heartbreaking scene, unable to believe what is happening. Yenna forces a smile, determined to prioritize survival above all else. The knight flies into a rage, barking at his soldiers for shooting down the high-value target. The soldiers tremble and stutter in the face of the knight's fury. The skeleton knight does not hesitate, hurriedly carrying Yennu away from danger. The knight refuses to give up, demanding that the skeleton knight and Yenna surrender immediately. Yenna smirks as a devious plan flashes through her mind. Yennu's cryptic question leaves the knight visibly flustered. The knight looks down, only to discover something igniting beneath his feet. Knight's eyes widen as he realizes the imminent danger. The skull-marked gunpowder barrels have been triggered, creating a lethal trap. Yennu doesn't forget to leave behind a painful parting gift. A magical explosion erupts, swallowing the soldiers in pure chaos. Poisonous smoke spreads, causing the soldiers to collapse in agony and blindness. Yenna seizes the opportunity, teasing Skeleton Knight about carrying her further. Skeleton Knight remains silent, continuing his journey without a word. The knight covers his nose, struggling to endure the encroaching toxic smoke. Despite his exhaustion, the knight screams orders to pursue Skeleton Knight and Yennu. Skeleton Knight swings his blade, ready to confront anyone who dares to stand in his way. A razor-sharp sword tears through the air. Skeleton Knight delivers a finishing blow, wiping out the obstacles in the blink of an eye. Skeleton Knight scolds Yennu for risking her life instead of running away. Yennu smiles, reaffirming her position as his ally. Skeleton Knight sighs, feeling helpless before this bizarre illusion. They quickly retreat into the deep forest, leaving the knight's hot pursuit behind. Skeleton Knight carries Yennu on his back, his hollow eyes darting around vigilantly. He breathes a sigh of relief upon noticing no signs of soldiers pursuing them anymore. Arrows remain lodged in the wound on Yennu's back. Skeleton Knight kneels, carefully snapping the arrow shafts to ease Yennu's pain, planning to treat the wound properly once they find a safe place. Suddenly, a voice dripping with contempt rings out from right behind him. Skeleton Knight whirls around, coming face to face with the knight, who mocks his strength. A sharp blade from the knight tears through the air, slashing straight towards Skeleton Knight. The lightning-fast attack sends blood splattering into the air. The knight reveals himself, his cold face and sharp eyes fixed on his target. He is the one relentlessly hunting down Skeleton Knight and Yennu. Knight stands tall, gripped tight on his sword hilt, his gaze filled with murderous intent. He has no intention of giving Skeleton Knight and Yennu another chance to escape. The Skeleton Knight's iron gauntlet hand reaches out, the very air around it trembling with every powerful movement. The Skeleton Knight is sent flying, its brittle skeletal frame reeling in mid-air under the terrifying pressure exerted by Arthur Leywin. Arthur Leywin stands tall like a mountain, pinning the Skeleton Knight to the ground as dust clouds erupt around them. Arthur Leywin narrows his eyes, his cold, piercing gaze sweeping across the scene, seemingly assessing the situation. Chubby Noble trembles, stuttering as he calls Arthur Leywin master in a state of sheer terror. The chubby noble looks on in a panic at the collapsed Skeleton Knight, unable to comprehend what is happening. The Skeleton Knight growls, furious that its plan to capture the target has turned into a farce. Skeleton Knight is utterly stunned to realize that Arthur Leywin is far from ordinary. Cold sweat pours down the chubby noble's face as he wonders why Arthur Leywin is impossibly strong. The chubby noble's face turns deathly pale as he realizes the fatal mistake he made in underestimating Arthur Leywin. A murderous aura emanates from behind. Arthur Leywin stands there, his shadow engulfing the chubby noble. In a fit of panic, the chubby noble draws his blade, trembling as he intends to end his own life. With the blade pressed against his throat, the chubby noble stammers out apologies in utter desperation. Arthur Lewin coldly orders him to stop, refusing to allow the chubby noble to take his own life. Arthur Lewin crosses his arms, his eyes filled with contempt as he looks down at the shivering noble before him. Blade drops to the ground as Arthur Lewin warns the chubby noble of the price he will pay for his false reports. Arthur Lewin turns his back and walks away, leaving the chubby noble gasping for breath in sheer terror. Arthur Lewin cold-bloodedly leaves the chubby noble to deal with the aftermath, abandoning everything behind him. Arthur Lewin's eyes flash with sharpness, his focus fixed entirely on the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight takes a defensive stance with its sword drawn, facing the soul-crushing pressure from Arthur Lewin. The skeleton knight is shocked to realize it cannot keep up with Arthur Lewin's speed. A gap in power and class that the skeleton knight has never experienced before against Arthur Lewin. Arthur Lewin stands there, an insurmountable wall to the skeleton knight. The skeleton knight stares intently at Arthur Lewin, questioning if there is even a chance of victory. Trembling intensifies, the skeleton knight senses that death is closing in, courtesy of Arthur Lewin. The skeleton knight falls silent, focusing every sense on the battle against Arthur Lewin. The skeleton knight casts aside all thoughts, leaving only the will to fight against Arthur Lewin. The skeleton knight gains momentum, preparing for one final, desperate charge toward Arthur Lewin. The skeleton knight lunges forward, determined to die fighting in this one-sided battle against Arthur Lewin. Arthur Lewin faces the skeleton knight, his gaze unwavering at this decisive moment. The chubby noble cannot believe his eyes that the skeleton knight would dare to stand in his way. The surrounding guards begin to moan in pain, throwing the chubby noble into a total panic. The chubby noble shrieks, urging the guards to take action immediately. His patience exhausted, the chubby noble screams repeatedly, demanding reinforcements. The guards remain unsteady and dazed, unable to comply with the chubby noble's commands. The skeleton knight suddenly freezes, sensing an unusual wave of pressure bearing down on it. The skeleton knight is horrified to realize it has been caught in an unpredictable type of crowd control skill. The system notifies that a high-level skill has been activated, stripping the skeleton knight of its ability to resist and restricting its movement. The skeleton knight kneels, stunned by the strange power that has just been forced upon it. Arthur Lewin steps forward, his eyes filled with amusement as he gazes down at the skeleton knight collapsed at his feet. The chubby noble trembles on the ground, having completely lost all composure. Arthur Lewin observes the scene, questioning how the summoned creature can still move even though the summoner has passed out. Arthur Lewin glances at the unconscious Yahello, who has arrows embedded in his back, and concludes that Yahello is far from a high-level summoner. Arthur Lewin draws his sword, contemplating that finishing Yahello off right now would grant him a significant advantage. The skeleton knight senses the killing intent, its glowing red eye sockets narrowing in terror. In a desperate state, the skeleton knight struggles to get up, forcing its body to move. Arthur Lewin's hand tightens around the hilt of his sword, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Arthur Lewin coldly pronounces judgment, ready to put an end to everything. The skeleton knight lunges forward, and as Arthur Lewin's blade clashes with the skeleton knight's weapons, intense sparks fly. The skeleton knight pours all its remaining strength into a counterattack, holding a fierce defensive stance. The skeleton knight's eye sockets flicker, its strength rapidly depleting after the impact. A piercing sound of clashing metal rings out as the skeleton knight's weapon is deflected by Arthur Lewin. Arthur Lewin furrows his brows, dissatisfied that his last attack failed to end the fight. Arthur Lewin thinks to himself that the intelligence he received was indeed accurate. The skeleton knight looks at the sword embedded in the ground, realizing it has reached a dead end. The skeleton knight looks up at Arthur Lewin, bracing for the final moment. Arthur Lewin swings his sword, decisively putting an end to all resistance. A fatal blow strikes the skeleton knight squarely in the chest, shattering its skeletal frame into pieces.